My name is Kim Rose, for those of you who don't know me. I'm the president of Southwest Writers this year, but before that, I got my degree in English many, many, many years ago, and then said, to hell with that, I don't know what I'm doing with this. And then got my EMT license and worked on an ambulance for 4 years. And now I'm writing tests for a company that does testing services for public safety, like firefighters and police officers. So the world's kind of merged. Last year, I ran the contest, and so I learned a little bit about contests in doing that. Before that, when I was in college, I was a managing editor and editor-in-chief and staff member for two of the literary magazines that UNM has on campus as their local things. And so it's not exactly a contest, but it was a lot of parallels to contests. So I do actually know one or two things that I'm going to say tonight. So I'm assuming everyone is here because they either have interest in submitting to a writing contest or have submitted to a writing contest and want to improve their methods, or just kind of want to know what this whole contest thing is about. Hopefully I can answer a couple little questions there and give you some advice based on what I saw last year running the contest. A little bit of background about how contests work before we get into how to win at them. I feel that it's very important to know how something works and why it works the way it does in order to know how best to game that system and find your way in. So the first step is we find a chair or committee for the contest, hopefully both, someone to run it and people to help the person run it. And that contest chair and the committee determine the rules, the categories, the deadlines, all the important bits that need deciding that no one really thinks needs deciding when they're just submitting to things. They decide if the judging is going to be blind or not blind, which Southwest Writers does blind judging. And that means that every entry is stripped of identifying information of the author. So judges, when they see the piece, they don't know who wrote it. They just know, here's a piece of poetry in front of me. Here's a short story. That way, there's no like, hey, I hate that guy, I'm going to score him badly. Or, hey, this person's my favorite person, I'm going to give them a great score on a not so great piece. Different category, or I apologize, I'm going to mix up categories and contests all night long because I did that the whole time I was putting this together. Different contests will do different things. Some are blind, some are not. It usually will say in the rules whether or not it's blind or not blind, or someone who's running the contest can tell you whether or not it's blind. And if it is blind, it will definitely be in the rules to not include identifying information. The chair and committee will also determine the number of judging rounds. Southwest Writers typically does one judging round where all of the pieces are viewed by judges once. Some contests do things to where all of the pieces are evaluated and then the top 30 go to the next round, and then those are evaluated, and then the top 10 go to the next round, and so on and so forth until they have their winners. And they'll determine the judging criteria, which, as Alan just said, we are hoping to update ours a little bit, but yeah, those are generally going to be kind of standard. I'll get more into criteria later. The next thing that happens is judge selection and training. And then the entries come in, and then the judging happens, and then they figure out who won, and then they give awards if there are awards to be given. And it's really that simple. 6 steps. Easy peasy. Anyone can do it. How judging works. This is our current and last year's and the year before last's criteria by which we judge entrance into the contest at Southwest Writers. It might be a little hard to read. I had a harder time reading it until this very moment, so I copied them down there. We judge pretty standard things for most pieces. Any piece of writing is going to have mechanics, language, theme, voice, overall impression. That's where the judge can say, I really liked this piece, but I don't know why. So different contests are going to use different criteria, but they're going to be, at least some of them are going to be similar to this list. Judges are trained consistently Typically, if there is judge training, they're all going to receive the same training, at least in a good contest. I work in the testing industry. Having people who are evaluating things be all on the exact same page is very important to get an accurate result. So we did 2 trainings last year. All of the judges had the same training. It was just to make sure they were on the same page and knew what they were all doing. There are multiple judges per entry in a good contest. Not every contest can afford to have multiple judges per entry. We barely can, which is why we need judges, because we want to see at least 2 judges per piece. Every piece is going to be evaluated by at least 2 judges. That way, if someone just was having a bad day and they gave a lower score, someone who had a better impression of the piece, they even out in the end. I'd like to have 3 judges per piece, but that's a conversation for a different day. Other thing is judges evaluate specific categories, and that could be contest dependent as well. The way Southwest Writers does it, since we're all volunteers and all of our judges are volunteers, is they say, hey, I know things about science fiction. I'll judge science fiction. And we go, here's a pile of science fiction. Go crazy. But if we handed that person a mystery, they'd say, hey, I don't know the tropes and the expectations for this genre because this isn't my genre. So I'm going to judge it like science fiction. So judges can be very specific in that respect. Some contests might have every judge look at every piece. That's not what we're doing here, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. The other big consideration for judging is the judging scale. Is it a scale of 0 to 10, 1 to 100, some other random numbers that people pick? Southwest Writers does 1 to 100, and we've determined that the average piece, the perfectly average piece of writing, is going to get a score of 50. So each of our 10 criteria is scored on a scale of 1 to 10. We add those up, we have a total out of 100. It makes the math easy because I'm not a math person. So general rules for contests in general, but also Southwest Writers, we have general rules and specific rules. Other contests may just have general rules, but they're definitely going to have some rules. They're generally industry standard if they're going to be general rules. Those are going to include things like the formatting, Times New Roman, double-spaced, paragraph indents, or file type like PDF and doc. Word count, that's going to be different contest to contest, but there are generally some kind of a limiting factor rule in contests. So whether it's word count or page count or line count, there's going to be something that restricts you to not publishing the Great American Novel in a short story contest. Names and languages. Generally, contests are going to say, hey, we do or don't want your names on your piece. Please do or do not include your name anywhere in the file name or on the piece itself. They may also restrict languages like, hey, we only want to see stuff in English because that's the only language our judges reliably speak. Or, Spanish or Navajo or any other language of your choice. Most contests are going to have rules about entries per category or categories per entry. So Southwest Writers, you can enter as many pieces as you want in one category. I can submit 50 haiku if my heart desires to do that. But I can only put each entry into one category. I can't submit it as a haiku and a flash fiction. That would be weird in the first place. So different contests are going to have different rules. That's one to really pay attention to because that's something that can get you disqualified if you are able to get around whatever gatekeeping they have in place and submit one piece in multiple categories. If they catch on to that, that's bad news. Overt inappropriate themes. It's contest dependent. What's inappropriate to one group, it may not be inappropriate to another. Southwest Writers prohibits, for example, like pornographic themes or excessive violence and gore and blood and guts themes or like politically charged meaning messages things. We don't want to see that. We're trying to keep things family friendly. But a horror contest might say, bring us all the blood and guts. Or a political writings contest might say, hey, bring us all the politics. We love that. So just know your audience. Know what you're submitting this contest, like who's running this contest and who's evaluating the pieces in this contest, because overt themes can get you in trouble. These rules are unbreakable. Unbreakable. Every rule is unbreakable. Hard stop. No ifs, ands, or buts. General rules are going to apply to every category no matter what, unless there's an exception, which unfortunately there are. But like Times New Roman, that's going to apply to every category. Kind of. Double space is going to apply to every category. Kind of. What I mean by that is there are some categories that have specific rules, such as in poetry. We don't want a 2,500 word poem. We want a 40-line poem or less. A 2,500 word poem would be very long. Poetry can be single spaced. So every piece can be double spaced, but poetry can be not double spaced. Screenplay. We don't want a 2,500 word screenplay necessarily. We want a limited number of pages. So 10 pages with a title page, no more than that. And then there may be something very case specific like screenplay, short screenplay in our contest can be submitted in Courier because to my understanding, that is the industry standard for screenplays. And we didn't want to make people have to move mountains to put their screenplay into Times New Roman. So all of those hard rules I just said on the previous page, they're all broken with a specific rule. It happens. That's why it's really, really, really important to read the general rules and also the specific rules for your category if they exist. It is imperative. And if you get sick of me saying the word rules, I apologize. I would say make a drinking game out of it, but I don't want to send anybody to the hospital tonight. So yeah, so these are unbreakable things as well, but they're very category dependent. And if you just look at the general rules for the contest page, you're gonna miss them. And then that could be bad, even detrimental. Okay, here's the fun part. I can't tell you how to win the contest. I can just tell you how to have the best chance to place as a finalist in a contest. Submit your revised, edited, or workshopped pieces. That sounds obvious and silly, but don't send rough drafts. Don't send fifth drafts when you intended to make 10 drafts of a piece. Just make sure your work is as good as it can be before you submit it. Make sure someone else has looked at it. Make sure 10 other people have looked at it. Make sure you've workshopped it. Make sure it's been edited and revised. My personal advice is to read the rules and your submission one last time for compliance to the rules. And if you have a really, really loving friend, give both of the rules and your submission to your friend and say, hey, what do you think? Does this work? And then maybe buy that friend a muffin or something for being a good friend. I recommend doing this. And if you're like me and you want to have things in front of you and not on a screen, print them out, print out the rules, print out your submission, go through, use the rules as a checklist. And as you're reading your submission, check off all the things you did right. And make a note of anything that you did wrong so you can go back and fix it. I also recommend submitting early as possibly possible. I make the terrible mistake of treating the end of the contest submission period as the deadline by when to have my work done, which is not a best practice. We saw last year, we did introduce a new software through which we were accepting submissions, and people had trouble with that. And so throughout the submission period, we had phone calls and emails saying, hey, I need help. I can't figure this out. This is a problem. I got an email 2 hours before the deadline closed saying, hey, I can't figure this out. I didn't submit. I was going to, but I couldn't figure it out. And it was 10 p.m. on a weeknight. I couldn't get back to them because I didn't see the email that late, and I couldn't fix it to allow this person to submit. So please have your work ready as early into the submission period as possible and get it in. Plus, it's kind of cheaper the way we do it, with the first week being a little cheaper with the early bird rate. So it's a win-win all around. And then I alluded to this earlier, submit your best work in the right category. So your best revised, edited, workshopped pieces as good as you can possibly make them until you want to throw them out the window in the correct category. Because judges only choose to judge certain categories because that's what they know. And if you submit something saying, this is definitely a romance, I promise this is a romance, this is the best romance I've ever written, and a judge looks at it and goes, I'm pretty sure this is like a murder mystery. I don't know how to evaluate a murder mystery. I'm going to judge this by romance, but like there weren't even two people in this story and no one had any love feelings whatsoever. It could affect your score. They're going to judge based on what they know. And if it's not in the right category, they might not know what to do with it. I did have several judges email me last year saying, hey, I don't think this piece fits in this category. And that created a whole, I'm going to go back to talk to the entrant and say, hey, what, you sure about this? So just don't put yourself in that position in the first place. The fewer communications you have to have about, was this the right choice? The better. Disqualifying factors. Don't break any rules. If you don't break any rules, your work won't be disqualified. I wish I could say it was that easy. It is that easy. I wish I could say that people didn't break any rules ever. In 2025, we had 320 total entries by the end of the contest. 55 of these 320 were disqualified. Almost 1/5 of our entries in the contest last year were disqualified, which is horrifying. And I went and crunched the numbers, and I'm not a math person, but I do promise that at least the left column adds up to 100%. Well, the middle column. We had one that had an inappropriate theme that was flagged. We had 6 that were in the incorrect font size. 14 that did single spaced or 1.5 space or like triple space instead of double spaced. 9 that exceeded the page count or word count or line limit, depending on whether it was poetry, screenplay, or prose. 4 had no paragraph indentations whatsoever. And I distinctly remember one of them didn't even separate their paragraphs with a line space. That was really hard to look at. And 21 had the wrong typeface. 21 people could have taken the rules list and their piece and gone, okay, here's the rule. No name on it, unpublished work, Times New Roman. Oh, wait, I need to go back and fix that. The 2 that I asterisked included tables of contents. At least one in each of those 2 disqualifications also included table of contents, which was against the rules. They weren't disqualified for the table of contents, but it was kind of a double whammy against them, which was unfortunate. So every single one of these problems could have been fixed with someone sitting down with the rules and their work one last time. I get it. I've been there. I've edited my pieces until I hate them and want to light them on fire because I just don't want to see those words anymore. But you can only help yourself by looking at your piece one more time and thinking about it in terms of what parameters you're trying to meet. So some document submission tips. Check your guidelines, check your entry. I'm sorry, it's tedious. I know I keep saying that, but it's going to be your best way to make sure your submission is successful. Check your line spacing. That was a big one. Beware, Microsoft Word does a stupid thing by default where it adds a line space between paragraphs of the same style. And so it can make things that are single spaced look double spaced when they aren't. But the minute it gets to someone else's computer where that setting isn't in effect, it messes things up. So if you don't know how to find that setting, Google it. It's really easy to turn off, but it will mess up your piece if you don't know that it's there. Paragraph indentations, use tab or program settings to set the start of every new paragraph at a certain distance. Don't use the space bar. Don't hit it 15 times. Because if you hit it 15 times every single time, but you miss it once and hit it 10 times, it's going to look bad. It's going to look inconsistent. It's going to be obvious what happened there. Not a disqualifying factor, but not not a pro move. And then if someone's trying to, say, turn your piece into a part of a larger work like a book or an anthology, that person has to go through every single paragraph and delete all of the spaces and replace them with tabs. So just use tab. It's right there. Cute little button.
Hey, Kim, can I ask about submitting in PDF? All of this is for Word docs, right? So doesn't our site allow PDF format submission?
We wouldn't. The only
Okay.
reason we allow PDFs is because Zealous, our submission software, can't distinguish file formats for categories, and screenplay being as difficult to format in a .doc format as it is, we had to be able to allow them to submit as a PDF, and so that opened up the ability for anybody to submit a PDF. I recommend submitting in Word, but if you use PDF, I recommend checking it in a regular Word program first and then converting it to a PDF just to make sure everything looks good. And then maybe compare the two side by side. Typeface and font size. Pay attention to if there's a distinction between title size versus body size, or title font typeface versus body font or typeface. Most things, the vast majority of things, are going to be asked for in Times New Roman. The things like screenplays are going to be asked for in Courier, and that's a very distinct font that you can see from a distance and know what it is. Just make sure you know what font sizes you are, because we had people who submitted the whole piece in 14, 16, 18 font. We had people submit size 20 titles all over the place. Just try to stay to industry standard. If you would submit it to an agent that way in industry standard with 12-point font, then it's probably okay. Punctuation. Go through and check your punctuation. Punctuation, spelling, grammar, mechanics, those things are almost always going to be factors in judging for a contest. And you don't want to get low scores just because you threw commas all over the place or left off all of your end punctuation. That would be bad. Beware punctuation checkers. I use Microsoft Word for work, and I use the spelling and grammar checker and punctuation checkers, and it is quite frequently wrong. It can be very good and it can catch a lot of things I miss, but it can also make some really silly suggestions. So it's always worth, after hitting, yeah, change all, to go back through and check it for yourself, because you're probably better at punctuation than the computer is, even if you don't believe that. Grammar and spelling, same thing, especially with things like science fiction and fantasy and proper nouns. Spelling checkers are just ridiculous. Grammar checkers too. There are some things that they're good at and some they aren't. So just make sure that you're not putting your faith wholesale into that thing. Always go back through it after you've done that. Word count. Microsoft Word has an inbuilt word counter thing. Google Docs has an inbuilt word counter thing. Grammarly has its own word counter thing. Use all of those. Use every single word counter you can find, because different word counters will count words differently. It doesn't make sense. I don't know why. I don't know how it does it. I think sometimes punctuation confuses it. So M dashes, sometimes it'll treat the words on either side as one word, or sometimes it'll treat contractions as two words. I don't understand. I discovered this the hard way doing NaNoWriMo many years, and my Microsoft Word told me I had 50,000, and the NaNoWriMo counter said, no, you're still at like 46,000. What are you doing? So use multiple checkers. I will say for the contest last year for pieces, we used Google Docs and went off of what that said. If it was really close, I would move it into a Microsoft Word and check that it was within the word count there as well. But they're all going to do things a little differently, and you don't want to have it, you don't want to take for granted that someone's going to do the due diligence and run it through multiple checkers themselves to see if you really are over the word count. you want to make sure that you're within the word count. Typically, titles don't count for word count, but also it's my opinion that human error is always something to take into consideration. And if you're 4 words over and your title had 5 words and someone forgot how to count 5 words and doesn't realize that, in some contests you could be disqualified. So I recommend being like 10 words under count if you're that close to the maximum. You can always cut 10 more words, right? So yeah, different programs count differently. Don't trust just one. If you Google word counter, there's like 1,000 of them. More tips. If the judging sheet info is available, read through your submission with that next to you, right next to your guidelines, and see how it measures up by your standards. If there isn't a judging sheet or info available, look up generic ones. Mechanics, language, punctuation, spelling, grammar, those kinds of things are always going to be there. You can usually count on like theme and originality and character and voice. Those kinds of things are usually going to be on a contest judging metrics. You can also take that judging sheet and your piece and give it to the same friend that you asked to read it with the rules earlier. Or if you don't have a friend that's willing to do that for you, maybe a family member that you can threaten to withhold dinner from if they don't do that. Just see how someone else would evaluate your work. Someone who's not part of the contest, someone who just can read instructions like the judging sheet has. If you're not sure about what category your piece should belong in, because this is a not uncommon problem, look at previous publications related to the contest if they're available, such as our Southwest Writers anthologies from previous contest winners. Or ask a friend, a critique group, a workshop classmate, someone to read it and say, hey, I think this is that. You can ask the contest organizers, but the contest organizer isn't going to read your piece to tell you what it is. They're going to say, I don't know, submit in whatever category you like the best. And that might not be helpful. Again, submit as early as possible. Technical difficulties are the worst, especially if the Zealous server goes down. You wouldn't be able to submit. If the submittable server goes down, you wouldn't be able to submit there. If your internet crashes on the last day and that was the day you were counting on submitting, that's a problem. So the earlier you get something submitted, the earlier you can deal with problems. And submit your work only when it's 100% ready. Like I said, that throw it out the window, light it on fire stage of I never want to see these words again. Because that means that it's probably as far as you can take that piece, which means that it's probably the best shape that piece is going to be in. And that means that the judges will see your best work, and then they're going to have a really hard time picking a winner, and that's the best problem to have. Also, not all contests let you edit submissions after you've hit submit. Some will. Some absolutely will. Some don't. It's better not to assume that you will be able to edit anything, even if the rules say you can't, and you say, hey, but contest organizer, I really messed something up and I did the wrong thing and I need you to fix it. Not everyone's going to be amenable to fixing that when they're running a contest because they've got enough else to do with their time. So make sure everything is 100% ready. You've checked all the rules, checked it twice, checked it the third time, made sure you had the correct file, the correct version of your story or poem or what have you. And then submit it and make sure all of your information is correct and according to the rules. Common questions that we may see while running a contest. Do I use a pen name or a legal name? I hadn't anticipated getting this question, but I did. And my answer was, well, do what you want and I'll figure it out later, which was not the right answer. That was not the best answer for me. It made more work later. So I recommend generally use your legal name, especially if there's a cash prize. If you have concerns because they're known for taking your work and publishing it without ever contacting you again, contact them and say, hey, this needs to be published under a pen name. Contest organizers are generally friendly people, I like to think. So, and this is a big question. And People get asked this a lot when they're in the publishing and writing world. If the submission platform has usernames and you're not sure if you should put your pen name or your real name there, and you've got a little screen name like Panda Friend, and that's your screen name, and you put Panda Friend as your first name and last name because you don't want to put your real name there, try to put your real name on the profile somewhere so that way the contest organizer can identify you. I had a staggering number of submissions that were submitted by unknown and NA and publishers' names and a lot of people who were just first names. And some of those people ended up winning things, and I had to become a detective and figure out who had what not their actual name situation going on. So just make it easier for your friendly contest organizer. How long should you wait to hear if you won? It's really going to depend on the contest. I say if the guidelines page doesn't tell you how long to wait, give it at least a couple months before you start asking, because judging takes time, and that's kind of the busiest part of running a contest. So just let them breathe, be patient. If you don't hear back in several months, then start asking them. And if they don't publish on a website or their social media or something, here are our finalists, then yeah, because you'll see if you're a finalist or if they have released that information. If you're not a finalist, they may not tell you, but if they put that information out there, that's your answer. If that made sense. What about publication rights? If someone's asking you for publication rights for your work, they will tell you what they need. They will tell you what rights they want to have. If your work is already published or due to be published, don't submit it as new until you verify that you can. Don't submit it as new work because it's not being published until September, but you already have it under contract, without talking to your agent or publisher, because you could create a can of worms for yourself, and no one has time for that. What if I use AI to do this one tiny thing, ideas or spelling or editing? Don't. If there is a rule against using AI, don't use it. Just at all, period. My rule of thumb is if you're uploading work to something that can evaluate your writing to a degree beyond the basic mechanics of spelling and grammar, don't use it. ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, those kinds of things can tell you, hey, yeah, this writing style is kind of like Ernest Hemingway, and you use a lot of declarative statements in your writing. I know that Word and Grammarly have similar things, and those are already kind of iffy. So I would stick to using those for spelling and grammar and punctuation. But if it's suggesting changes that you wouldn't have thought of making, like creative changes, stay away from it. We're still trying to figure out the world of AI as artists in this world, and it's ever shifting. So it's better just to not be involved. What if I break the rules just a little because I like to do this for the style or to give you context for my piece, like adding tables of contents that weren't supposed to be there? Don't do it. Don't be cute. Don't be clever. Don't be subversive. If you break a rule, even though you think you have a good idea, you will be disqualified. I had at least a handful of pieces that included information that did not need to be part of their entry last year, and they wrote on the piece, ignore this part. Well, it was submitted, so we didn't ignore that part. Just don't put yourself in that situation. Follow the rules. Rules are your friend. Well, what if I don't like the rules? Join the contest committee for next year. Help us fix them. They can't change once we set them until the next contest. So if you don't like the rules this year, please come talk to us and help us fix them for next year, because we really want this contest to be the best it can be for our members and our writing community. And we can't do that if we don't know how to make it better. After you submit, what happens? Well, check your email. Pay attention to your submission platform if that's how they communicate with you. Check your spam folders. Don't check it every day. Don't stress yourself out like that. It is not worth the high blood pressure to check that every day. Just once a week is probably enough. Be patient. Judging takes time. Judges have lives too. They're all volunteers. In a good contest, finalists and winners will be notified as soon as possible. There are good contests that don't notify you until a year out or whatever. I mean, I haven't heard of that, but I'm sure there are. They won't notify you until way later because they have this whole awards thing set up and you don't know if you're a finalist or not. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Southwest Writers sized contests. Like, we turned around and got finalists notified within the same 2-3 week period that judges finished judging because we needed to get permission to publish their work. In a good contest, finalists will be told, hey, you're a finalist, as soon as that contest organizer is able to. Now, if able to is as soon as I know versus as soon as I'm allowed to tell you at the award ceremony, that's going to be situation dependent. If your work was disqualified, you will likely not be told. Some submission platforms will automatically say, hey, your stuff was rejected. Some won't. Some contest organizers may say, hey, sorry, your work just wasn't for us. A lot won't. So don't expect to hear back if your work was disqualified. And if you don't hear back, it doesn't mean your work was disqualified necessarily. And also be nice to your contest organizers. And if you have constructive feedback, please deliver it respectfully, because I got some angry emails at the end of the contest last year and they really hurt my feelings. And I'm a people too. And our people running the contest this year are people too, and they have feelings that can be hurt. So just be nice to them. It takes a lot of work to run a contest. There's no need to hurt people's feelings. My surprise of, hey, look, it's the contest for this year was ruined by me earlier. So our 2026 contest is going to be themed by human hands. Categories include fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and screenplay. The rules and the list of categories will be the same as last year. Our judging sheet will be the same as last year, with the change that judges will not be providing comments on entries. That's one of the things we want to fix. We don't have the time, personnel, brain power, energy, or bandwidth to fix that at this time. So we're hoping to fix that for next year to make judging comments be a thing that's useful. So if you would like to be involved in that, please help. We already went over the dates, so I'm not going to do that. These are our categories. I'm not going to read them all. I'm going to come back to the screen after I get to my last slide, so that way you can see them if you want. But they are the same as last year. We've got a few opening chapters of fiction and nonfiction, some short fiction, some short nonfiction, 3 poetry categories, short screenplay, and flash fiction. So there we go. Yeah, so that was me. Thank you for listening to me talk for all this time. If you have any questions for me, you can contact me at president@swwriters.com. If you have any questions about the contest in general, you can contact contest@swwriters.com. I'll go back to this screen. And now, if anyone has any questions,